Hey, everybody.
It's Raj and Bruce, the Inglorious Pastords, coming back. Season 8. And what episode is it, Bruce?
Yeah, it's episode 2.
Wait, I should have asked you actually which season it is. Because...
Episode 2.5, sort of, because episode 1 was the original episode 1. We'll call it episode 0 because there was zero sound on it. Episode 0 was the silent podcast, which none of you have heard because we don't have the audio. I did keep the video of the silent podcast. So if you want to see, we actually thought about loading the silent podcast where people could watch it. And then we would just put some captions in every now and then, like, great word, Bruce.
Well, here's the fun thing.
Outstanding point there, Raj.
If you go to the YouTube and watch that particular episode,
it'll make you laugh.
Well, here's the fun part. You can add the fun is try and figure out how much time Bruce talks in that video and how much time Raj talks.
I'll give you the numbers right now. It's 32 minutes to 16.
Ooh, that's... I think you may be overestimating my voice.
You don't think you talked for 16 minutes? It's possible that you didn't.
Well, part of that was me laughing.
Hey, just for fun, before we get into important things, let's talk about unimportant things, because that's part of what we do on the Pastords.
Right.
Interesting stat I read last night.
Okay, good. Then I'm going to have a stat for you.
Oh, I love stats.
All right.
And it's a football stat.
This is football stat. Yours is probably pro, mine is college.
Okay, yours is college, right?
Okay.
So mine's pro. So Bill Belichick,
okay,
and Tom Brady, and it was just the stats on Bill Belichick, Tom Brady. So the numbers were: Bill Belichick with Tom Brady has won 20 playoff games and lost 11.
Okay,
so which is still an incredible record,
right?
To win 20 playoff games, but without Tom Brady, he's 1-2.
Okay,
Tom Brady with Bill Belichick is 20-11.
Okay.
Without Bill Belichick, he's 5-0.
Okay.
And this person was arguing, was it really the coaching? It's an interesting thing. He's like, what he was arguing, and his thing is, great coaches can win with a myriad of quarterbacks. And he talked about two coaches, right. Joe Gibbs, who won with what we sort of saw as average quarterbacks, but great coaching and made it work and some of those things. Anyway, it was just a fascinating. I'm like, never thought of it that way. Tom Brady, Mr. Dick Clark, ageless wonder, continue 5 in a row. So there's something about, we'll come back to the Broncos. There's something about having a really good quarterback that makes a huge difference.
Well, right. And a really good coach. I mean, because this kind of conversation in New England land gets brought up all the time. And it's a very, but the idea that somehow Brady would have won his 6 without, I mean, you even look at his early, especially his early, his very first Super Bowl, the defense shuts down the greatest show on turf. He throws for about 150 yards, which is great, So there's this.
And think about even how important coaching is.
Right.
Tom Brady is who he is, drafted in the 6th round out of Michigan, not even a throwing school. Because of a coach that developed a player, that others did not see as much potential in. Now, of course, I think everyone sees the upside of Tom Brady now. So you're exactly right. That article, in that sense, was skewed toward maybe Belichick's not as great a coach as Belichick.
Some people call him Belichick.
Oh no! Don't start. But so.
Well,
that was my stat for the morning.
Yeah. So
Aaron Rodgers going to Denver. Just gonna keep saying until it happens.
Speak it into existence. So there's some conversation now about, did you watch the national championship game?
Well, I did until it bored me to tears. At the beginning of the 4th quarter, I literally just turned it off, because here was my thought process. If you leave Alabama in the game in the 4th quarter, they're just going to beat you. You just can't do it. Thank heavens I was wrong. I mean, I was never more excited to wake up the next morning and see that Georgia had won the game. But yeah, I watched 3 quarters and 2 minutes.
Okay, so as you're probably aware, there's just like this substantial concern about the Southeastern Conference taking over, just totally dominating college football, which
Which we only won like 3 bowl games though.
Okay, the bowl games were,
which is it.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah.
But
okay, so the conversation.
You've got 2 teams in the final. I mean, the 2 teams are SEC teams. Yeah. But here was the stat. So there's 2 pieces of this I want you to guess.
That'd be like having Michigan, Ohio State in the final or something. Just something. I don't know that can happen because I think they're in the same division in the same conference.
Right. So you have.
Maybe they're not.
Next year, you've got the top players, top 101 players rated by, I forget the, anyway.
Athletes.com. Whatever.
It's not that. All right. So 3 SEC teams are the leading. Which 3 SEC teams are the top 3 of those 101? They're getting the most of those
the recruiting class.
Recruiting class, yes.
Well, I'm gonna go safe with Georgia and Alabama.
Those are 2. Ding ding.
The third one. This is interesting.
Yeah, this one is interesting.
It could be Ole Miss.
It's not Ole Miss.
Okay.
Texas A&M.
Oh,
didn't see that coming.
No, what's his name over there?
All right, now here's where the stat gets even better.
Jimmy John. He's got like 2 first names. It's a Southern Jimmy Joe.
Yes, and he sells deli sandwiches on the side.
Oh, why am I getting so old?
Well, it doesn't.
Well, he was at the Seminoles forever, and then he moved over there. Bobby Joe Raymond
Bowden?
No, it's not. No, it's not Bowden. Aha! Okay, go ahead. It'll come to me later.
Yeah. So, of those 101 top players in the recruiting class, how many of those players are going to Georgia, Alabama, and Texas A&M?
Please tell me it's less than 80%.
Oh, yes, it's less than 80%.
Okay, good.
No.
63%.
No. 37 of the top 101 players are going to 3 schools.
Okay.
So it's like roughly 12 apiece are going. So you've got 2/3 are left for the whole rest of the country
to navigate.
I just thought that was.
I'm guessing Tennessee is going to get maybe one of those, maybe the 101st one.
No, they will, but then they'll transfer.
That's true.
No, it's
thanks for
first
that
time
word.
ever they were recruited and they entered the transfer portal before they ever saw the field.
They signed. Oh, signing day, and then they eventually immediately transferred. It's a little known NCAA rule where you can make a shift and you get an extra year.
So this whole transfer portal thing, good, bad. I don't know. What do you?
I have no. Here's the thing. It's because it's not just the game anymore. It's big business.
Right.
So the player, understandably, and the parents of the player are trying to figure out. All right, where is the best place for my son or daughter to play this sport and be successful and get TV time?
Right. Well, and especially if they're thinking they have NFL possibility.
Oh, absolutely.
So, what are the programs
so you're gonna
that are going to best make it most likely for them to excel? And
then what Alabama's learned is you have to be sort of the top quarterback on the Alabama team, or you may have to transfer out just to get playing time.
Right.
It was interesting even to watch. Well, we've seen it. We've seen a lot. I was trying to think of where Jalen Hurts ended up.
Right.
But now Tagliova and Hurts, both NFL quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And starting quarterbacks. And Jalen Hurts' team went to the playoffs, interestingly enough.
No, so initially, I kind of had this thought, the portal, the rich are going to get richer, right? They're going to, but watching how it's playing out, now you are having.
If you have a great quarterback who's not going to get snaps here because there's a greater quarterback.
Right. Or a receiver.
Yep.
So now I'm watching and saying this really top line player who's not getting the playing time that they want at this program. So it's a good lesson even about your initial idea. I look at a thing, okay, I think this may be bad for the game. I'm not sure if that's, but then to look and say, no, actually, this was an unintended, I didn't see this coming, but that makes sense now. So anyway, I just see that's and now interesting.
I would love to see a whole lot more parity in college football.
Right.
I realize money drives a lot of that. I don't know at what level.
But you don't think
it would be great if you could only sign so many top 100 or 5-star players. But there's apparently no salary cap. There's no cap on Alabama can recruit 27 of them.
Well, here's the thing. That's that whole thing of, once you start saying, oh, you can't go to this school.
Right.
We're going to
can't do that.
Right. Because now all kinds of things come into play. So
it's tough. And maybe nothing is as simple as it seems.
Right.
There's irreducible complexity to so many things. And I think because of the way that I'm wired, I tend to oversimplify things.
Yep.
I'm trying to get them condensed, concise. And certain things I just realize it's too broad, it's too wide, there's too much depth. I could look at a certain thing at a surface issue and go, this is a problem because,
right.
And then you could give me 4 counterpoints as to why that's not actually as much of a problem as I think, or not a problem at all.
Yep.
And I'm like, it makes me want to stay out of certain conversations because I don't know enough to have an intelligent opinion about it. It's not that I don't have an opinion.
Right.
It just may not be an intelligent one.
But I think this actually gets at where we really want the answers to everything to be simple.
Well, sure.
We really want, and they almost never are. And I'll find that we end up backing out of conversations because of the complexity. I don't want to get into, even if I say something like COVID, how we respond to COVID. Well, the reality is there's a tension between too much fear and just leaning too far on the side of lockdown. But then there's this other legitimate concern about
too reckless.
Yeah. Whatever, just let whatever take its course and, or absolute freedom. Well, the answer is found somewhere in the middle. I was even thinking about on a silly example, not silly, but even if you start thinking about playoffs, okay, like that, there's how do you do the playoffs for
seeding,
the college?
Okay, yeah.
And one part of me I realized, this is simple. You simply want the 4 best teams, right? I mean, that's just right. But I realized,
what's the criteria for the 4 best teams?
But now listen, we don't do that in the NFL football. Why? The 7 best teams in the AFC don't make it.
Yep.
So I realized I wanted to apply this one standard to the college. But then I started thinking about NFL. I said, well, that's complicated. So you got these conferences.
Yeah, you win your division. You can have a worse record than someone else, but they're not going to the playoffs.
Oh, it's happened. So it's why you've had in NFL, you've had teams with a lesser record. The top 7 records don't make it. Where I'm getting at there is, at some point I would have thought, well, it's just simple. You want the 7 best teams. Well, but there are other factors that come into play. What you reward, so it's never as simple as it seems. So we have to be careful about, I think in our attempt to make everything simple, we just make it cut and dried. We don't want to hear another conversation. We don't want to enter the complexity. So let's say I hold an idea, if it's on COVID or it's some idea of an approach to the gospel, whatever it is, I can land on my position and feel the discomfort of, I don't want to enter in a conversation. I just want it to be simple. So go to the polls. It's I'm either all in or I'm all out. And I've seen more of that happening. And I think we're impoverished for that.
Yeah. And it was the 2 things that I thought about when I was listening to your Facecast this morning, even talking about how we hold values differently and some other things. I was thinking about one thing that I so appreciate now that I didn't appreciate as much earlier about our dad. Our dad, you remember how much he taught balance?
Mm-hmm.
He would talk about balance. And it wasn't that you have to find the exact middle of something.
Right.
But there has to be a balance between. There's usually some truth between the two poles. So that was first thing, this idea of balance, because balance, depending on the level of your core, balance can be hard to do.
Yes.
I mean, it's just some people are more balanced physically and athletically than I am. And it's very like Marty Booth, he can do certain things just easy peasy running across, large ravines on logs that have fallen down. Where if I try it, I'm going to end up in the river below every time. It's about balance can be hard. But the other thing that one of my clients pointed out in the last couple of weeks, who's an engineer, it's simple and obvious, but I'm like, it's absolutely true. He said, when you take a pendulum and you start it over here, when you let it go, he said, it never stops at center. I thought, isn't that true? It never goes, whoop, oh, we're right here. The pendulum always goes to the far side. And I think it is kind of where we are culturally. There's like, we're at one or the other, but there's no, it's very hard to stop in the center. So I was thinking, over the weekend, I was doing a lot of writing, and I was thinking about even how I describe myself politically. All right. Because I was writing on labels, and we have labels, and you have politically, you have three major labels: Democrat, Republican, Independent,
and Communist.
We're going to get there. You're going ahead. Okay. And I realize I've for years, I've called myself on Facebook a Republicrat. And it's not because I lean more toward Republican than Democrat. It's just easier to say than Demoblican. Demoblican sounds like something that's running around on Halloween.
Right. You scared me a little there.
Okay. But I realize I'm a Republican Republicrat with a strong tendency toward centrism. I mean, that's that thing. I've decided I'm going to change my political affiliation on Facebook.
Okay.
I'm just going to put Jesus.
Wait, you can put your political affiliation on?
Oh, yeah. Mine's been there. It says Republican. But I need to change that because, again, some people might assume it's more Republican than Democrat. And again, the Demoblican, it just doesn't work. It doesn't pop. So I'm just going to put the way of Christ. That's my political affiliation, the way of Christ. That's how I seek to vote.
I was just waiting to hear which place you were going to land. And
so here's the thing. I realize I abhor labels. I try to avoid them.
Right.
I do not want people to pigeonhole me into certain things unless it's a label that I like. Isn't that interesting?
Well, sure.
So when someone says, Bruce, you're such a risk taker, that's interesting. That's a label that I like. Others would hate that label.
Right.
In other words, that would be a totally against their personality, their approach to life, and those things. But if someone says, Bruce, you're simple. Well, that could be good or bad. You mean like simple as in
not bright?
Not bright. Simple as in concise. That's a good thing. So labels, and we were talking about this before the show, but labels can be helpful or unhelpful.
Right.
Okay. So if we're identifying certain things, like a label on the outside of a can of something that gives you the ingredients, here's what's actually in it.
Sure.
That's a helpful thing. But labels with assumptions are not as good. In other words, if a person says Democrat, and then in the list of ingredients, they've included socialist, baby killer, all those kinds of things, it's an unhelpful label. Right. So as I've been giving more thought to this, I'm like, all right, part of the way that we end up polarized is, first, we take the issue, whatever the issue is, and then we categorize people in relation to that issue. And those categorizations are based on assumptions, generalizations, biases, and even core negative images that we have about that group of people. So we lump them into a category. And then you did a whole talk on this one time, lumping and dumping. Once we've lumped someone into a category, then we feel permission to dump on them.
Dismiss them. I don't have to listen to them. Or
they're bad people.
Right. Well, that's the problem of moralization.
Right.
So where we land, whether it's with ideas, I like new ideas, I like old ideas, or whatever position we land on, we tend to retreat to the end of a pendulum. We tend to into a pole, but then we tend to moralize. It's not just that person thinks differently. it's that their thinking is, I'll attach a moral flaw to it. It's even where you put, okay, Democrat baby killer.
Yep.
I put a emotionally charged,
and I will typically exaggerate the value or the virtue of my position and exaggerate the downside of the other person's position. It was an interesting word that I heard in a movie recently called virtue signaling. Have you heard of this?
I've heard of the term.
Yeah, virtue signaling. It's this idea of I'm constantly talking about how good my position is and why it's so good and why I'm in essence a good person because I hold this. It's an exaggerated sense of virtue about why I hold this position. But then the opposite side is I exaggerate the wickedness, the evilness of this other thing. And I realize that's what gets people on the polls. Well, I don't want to be known as a wall builder.
Right.
Or I don't want to be known as a baby killer. Or I don't want to be known as a racist. Or I don't. And it's this, when we attach labels and then start dumping on those labels, all this other stuff.
Yep.
And it's exaggerated about how good our position is, how bad their position is. It's not helpful.
Well, they're all things that keep us from having conversations. There are things that keep us from wrestling with ideas, wrestling with wherever I am. It's the whole thing. Okay, we're talking, people listen to us that would say, okay, I'm not a Republican, I'm a Republican, or I'm a Democrat. And it's...
Or a Demoblican.
Where I will land in a place where I just won't critique my side of the poll. I won't critique my party. It's this idea and I realize that's the safer place. The safer place is whatever position I have, whatever group I'm of, we're all right. And the other group's all wrong. Because if I've made them all wrong, I've got nothing to learn from them. I don't need to listen to them. Beyond just dumping on them, I can dismiss them. I don't have to listen. They have nothing to teach me. There's nothing. And then our discernment muscle starts to atrophy. And this is one of the things that I'm because we're not using it anymore. I'm seeing more and more in our culture right now, our discernment muscle is atrophying because we simply get to a place where we don't have to use it. I'll retreat to this group. We all agree on this. We're all, and life is simple here. There's no complexity on this poll. And by the way, over in that other poll over there, life is simple too, because it's all, and we've made the other group, those are the enemy. Those are the bad people. We're right. We're good. And we're not learning to wrestle with, wait, there are ideas in my group, there are ideas that I have. Come on, how ridiculous and arrogant is it for me to think I don't have ideas right now that are wrong, some of them badly wrong.
And that's the importance of critical thinking.
Critical thinking.
Not criticism of others, but critical thinking. How am I holding this?
Right.
And something I haven't explored this. I haven't even fleshed this out. So I'm sort of sharing this without a lot of thought. Here we go.
All right,
but
listeners.
I wonder if sometimes we're afraid of admitting that the other group is right about something because we're afraid we're giving up power. We're going to give them power, and then all of the ideals of their group is going to take over. And I don't agree with. But there's so much value in saying, because I've said this for years about Republicans are right about certain things,
right,
and wrong about certain things.
Right.
Democrats are right about certain things and wrong about certain things. And in saying that, I don't feel like I'm giving or taking power from either of them. It's just the reality.
Right.
No one's right on everything. I don't sadly, I don't even agree with myself on everything.
No, and it's so healthy for us to be able to say that, to speak where others are right. I wonder, okay, I'm thinking of the power term, but I'm also thinking it's a cousin, but maybe it's a concern. I'm giving credibility.
Yeah, because if I validate that.
Right. If I validate
that one component.
But I think this was actually the tension. Even I think about sort of Jesus, the religious leaders, and Jesus' response. Jesus' love for, his listening to, his affirming certain things. So there are certain things he would say, the tax collectors or prostitutes are getting into the kingdom ahead of you. Well, that sounds like he's validating everything that they're doing.
Yeah.
It sounds like he's
acceptance is not unilateral approval.
But he could also say, he could also say about a Gentile, I haven't seen this kind of faith in Israel. He had this, he could just simply say, that's great faith. He didn't have a fear. Oh my goodness, where will people take that?
Yeah. And he knew where they would take it, because in Galilee, it almost got him killed.
Right.
Because he talked about, the Jews didn't get a healing, but Naaman the Syrian did. And
right.
I'm basically telling a parable about you guys right now.
Right.
Well, we'll throw you off a cliff. How do you feel about that? Here's another thing I thought about Jesus, and this is just a word that I'm coming up with. I love to come up with words. So
give us a word.
Well, we think about
Mr. Republicrat.
Partisanship is, you vote along party lines. The partisan, this is not going to make it through House and Senate because everyone's going to vote on party lines. But then there's places where we're bipartisan, and typically it's if we all sense there's a perceived threat to something we all embrace.
Right.
Okay. So like war, not always, but World War II, it's like, all right, we are all in. This is both House and
Senate.
We're a family now. We're a family now. House and Senate, we're in. 9/11, the terrorist attack, we are all in on the war on terror. It was this perceived threat to values that maybe we all hold. But then I thought about Jesus, and I want to create a new word. Jesus was constantly what I would call transpartisanship. He transcended partisanship. Even on this whole thing, because it said that, and I'm going to talk about this in the book, but they said they came to him to divide the people. In other words, you had Sadducees and Pharisees getting together, which did not get together. But because Jesus was perceived as a common threat to what they both valued, the power that they had, or at least the status quo, they're going to try to divide the people. And so they brought a political issue to Jesus. Mm-hmm. Hey, Jesus, on the whole tax thing, should we pay taxes or not? Should we pay taxes to this terrible occupying force that's taken over the nation of Israel, or should we acquiesce?
But here's the thing: before you go, because they're trying to put him in a camp.
Yep.
They're trying to give him a label.
Yep.
So this is because they realize once you get him in a label, we know what people do. If I can get him in a camp, we're going to be able to control him. We can control the narrative. We can,
or at least we can control half the people.
Right.
Because half the people are going to be like, don't pay taxes. Right. Half the people are, you should pay taxes.
Right.
But he gives them an answer that is transpartisanship. It transcends any partisan thing. Well, give you, look, who's on there? Let's look at that little coin. Mm-hmm. Whose inscription?
Right.
And the inscription was Tiberius the Divine in short. And it's interesting. He said, look at the inscription. Now, he says, so give to God what is God's. Divinity. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Little silver coins. He wasn't saying anything interesting enough about whether you should pay taxes or not. I mean, it's in my mind. I realize you could interpret that both ways, but that was the beauty. I have wished several times. Have you ever wished this, that you were as smart as Jesus? When the questions come in culture, because we have questions. We have what I call divisive questions in Christian culture all the time. What's your position on, now let's say transgender,
right?
What's your position on, my mind went blank. Oh, like the inerrancy of scripture. I'm like, I wonder how Jesus would answer these. I wonder how Jesus, because it would be such a good answer.
Right.
And it would be transpartisan.
Right. Well, the thing is, I think
I'm just not
Jesus does speak in some people's answers, and occasionally he'll speak through yours or mine or other, this is
maybe transpartisan was the word that Jesus gave me.
Right. Well, here's another one of those moments.
Okay.
Because people try to do this all the time with him. Remember, so there's the one he's teaching. Once again, he's teaching group of people. And then there's a kind of commotion over here. And there's some religious beliefs, and they're bringing in this cowering woman. Okay.
Yeah.
And so the law says, so they bring this woman, she can't even look up. She's kind of, and I'm trying to look at even Jesus' face here, what's going on, the law says we should stone her, right? You're all this mercy thing, whatever. We're hearing this, whatever. They're trying to put him in a camp. Again, they're going to get him.
This is so transpartisan.
Right.
Yes.
In this group, this thing, is he going to stand for the law because that's what they're really on the law side.
Does he have a high view of Scripture?
Does he have a high view
Or
of
a low view
Scripture?
of Scripture?
Does he have a high view of law
Yep.
and consequences and truth? And they feel they've set this is the perfect, we're going to get him in a category. And then people will take sides. Because once we get him in a label, so this is our way of our power and control.
He's anti-law.
Right. And he says, let's do this.
Tell you what.
Wait, hold on. Before I say anything, I'm going to write some stuff down here on the ground, in the sand, and the dirt, which apparently they could have read in some way, perhaps, and there might have. I was in my mind.
It's got a lot, pros, cons.
I always, in my mind, this is this broken part of me. I want him to, what's like, I know what you did last summer, kind of where he just starts writing that trip to Cairo, that
what happens in Cairo stays in Cairo,
or this thing where different ones of them kind of, I in my mind, I want him to have write down some things that are clues to, I know a little bit more about your lives maybe than you think. I don't know what he wrote, but
I'm fairly sure he was playing tic-tac-toe.
But he says, all right, totally. The trans part, he says, the one of you that doesn't have any sin, okay, you get to be first in line to throw the stone. And he refused repeatedly.
Gosh, that was so good.
To be put right.
Just that was.
But this is that moment. And here's the thing: everybody, even his own disciples, wanted to give him a label. His disciples, everybody wanted him to be in his family. Wanted him to be in a particular camp. The Jewish people wanted him to be in a certain camp.
What's interesting is Jesus was and that I just never thought about this. I don't know how to put this in words, but it's interesting. He put everyone in the same place. He actually, in one sense, moved people toward where he already was. So Jesus goes back to writing, whatever he's writing. The trip to Egypt, whatever else he's writing, and one by one stones are dropping. The older people are going, oh, that's got us again. The young people are like, I was really wanting for a throwdown here. I just really,
right.
And then they all go away. And so Jesus looks up and he says, is there no one here to condemn you? Now, interestingly enough, he moved that mob to a place of non-condemnation. They didn't condemn her. They could have said, well, regardless of whether I've sinned or not, I'm almost sling. Is there no one here to condemn you? She said, no one. And then he said this beautiful thing about where he already was. Mm-hmm. Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. That is he did that so many times.
And so if I'm coming to where even kind of I think today, what we want to do, and I think we do it in various ways, but I think what we would love to do, here's how I envision in my mind. Jesus is on the planet today. We get to have that conversation. You think about how Jesus would respond. And I can see a group say, okay, you Democrat, Republican, are you for this party that supports abortion and the killing of babies? Tell us what kind of response, based on what we just talked about, the kind of response, people trying to get him in a camp. What I'm certain of, and that's a strong term, because I look at the scriptures and I look at Republicans and I look at Democrats, and none of them has a corner on Bible truth. None of them.
And none of them have a corner on not killing. I just thought about Jesus, the way that Jesus defined murder, right, by hating your brother. Now think about this.
Oh gosh, that's
Jesus might. Yes, he might come back with, okay, those of you without sin, those of you who have never hated your brother, yes, you can condemn that party.
Right, right. Let's see. I'm for the party.
So, but raise of hands. Let's see who that's going to be. Everyone's like,
I'm for the party that's not killing anyone.
Right.
I'm for the party that's not hating anyone. I'm for the.
Well,
it's like,
and even even the thing about law and God's take on law, it's just and it was actually a black pastor that pointed this out to me the first time I ever saw this. Even when you think about the issue of pro-life in our culture, and you have people that are pro-life, also pro-gun, also pro-death penalty, but in my mind I'm going, there seems to be a conflict there, because even when you look back at the first murder in Scripture, the very first one,
right?
If God's heart was simply, hey, if you kill someone, you got to be killed. That's just the heart of God. In other words, if that's where you land, well, you'd have to take out the whole story of Cain and Abel, because in that situation, the first murder. I mean, if it's time to make a statement, this is precedent. Right. In our world, we would call this precedent setting.
Yep,
it's the first murder in the history of mankind, and yet God doesn't kill Cain, doesn't take his life.
Doesn't take King David's life.
Okay, so that's the second place I was going. The law demanded, because David didn't just kill one guy. David killed a bunch of guys. There was a lot of people that died that day, not just Uriah.
You think about how many of the 10 Commandments he blows up. How many of the 10 Commandments King David blows up in that larger story? The Bathsheba, Uriah, the killing, we've
got covet, we've got murder, we've got adultery,
deceit,
we've got stealing, we've got lying,
right?
We've got not loving the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul.
Right.
We've got,
it's most of them.
It really, I think it could be all 10. You don't suppose it happened on the Sabbath, do you?
And surely his parents had told him not to do those things.
I mean,
so he was
so he's not honoring his parents in that moment. So that blows up so many things.
Yeah, it's even realizing again, and I've done this so many times, I still do it again, even where we can selectively pull biblical stories or instructions, let's say from the Old Testament. Some I'm taking this very, but then other ones, we have ways of, and in some way you can't avoid some of that. You're always interpreting, but maybe the bigger point is to actually realize, well, of course we do that, but be very careful about moralizing your position about this idea that how I'm looking at it can't be wrong.
Well, and even the fact, because Jesus blew up so many of those things, even about the intent of law or the intent of laws. It's what I was reading this week. I'm into Luke now. I'm like through chapter 6. It's fascinating. Okay. But he's talking about his disciples were hungry, and so they're going through grain fields, and they're rubbing them together, and they're eating the grain, and the Pharisees see it, and they're like, "Why are your disciples doing that which is unlawful on the Sabbath?" Of course, Jesus, I think with a smile, it's one of those "haven't you read" moments. He knows that they have devoted their life to reading Scripture. They're reading the Bible all the time. He said, "Did you guys miss that point where David was hungry and his companions?" Yeah, they went into the temple. They ate the sacred bread. Why? They were hungry. Right. Guess what? Turned out God was okay with that. That was not the norm. The law, I think, I don't know what the law would be with eat the sacred bread. It's certainly not good.
Right.
But Jesus said the intent of that whole thing was they're hungry. It's okay. Even the Sabbath, because there was multiple places. Luke kind of condenses multiple stories into one teaching about Sabbath. I think they happened at different times, but he kind of wove them together where Jesus says, okay, so there's a guy he's in synagogue that day. He's got this, withered hand, a shriveled hand, and the Pharisees are watching to see if he'll heal him. Right. It's just fascinating. They want to see, is he going to do it on the Sabbath? Because then we've got him. Right. Back to the whole, we're going to divide the people.
He's a lawbreaker.
There are 6 days a week that you can be healed. Right. Which is such an interesting thing. But not on the Sabbath. So Jesus looks at them in anger. Do you remember that part?
Yeah.
I mean, it makes him angry. This stubborn lack of compassion. Right. He said, which one of you, if you have a son that falls into a pit, isn't going to pull him out on the Sabbath?
Right.
Or forget a son. Even if you have a donkey.
Right. You're gonna
that falls, you're going to you're going to get him out. Should not this, son of David that's been bound up for X number of years, shouldn't he be freed on the Sabbath? Therefore, he said, number one, I'm Lord of the Sabbath, but also that Sabbath was made for man. I wonder how many other laws were made for man and not man for the laws. And that's where we miss even the intent.
Well, he's asking, and we're maybe circling it back. He's asking him to discern, to think.
Yes. Your
conclusions.
That's a discernment muscle.
Right. Here's where he's coming back and he's saying.
So you're saying if your kid fell into a pit.
Right. He's saying, now think through your conclusion. He listened to him. Okay, here's what you're saying. I want you to think about that. Do you hold that all the time? Is that really what's going on here? And this is the thing. This is why I need to listen to people who disagree with me, because it may be the voice of Jesus that is calling me. Have you thought through all your conclusions? Because listen, I have strong ideas about things. I'm not, and we should. There's certain things that we haven't hold ideas passionately. Not wrong to hold them passionately, but to hold them indiscriminately, where I can't discern, to hold them
passionately and humbly.
Right.
It's just this thing
of
I'm
tension.
Passionate about this, but I'm also humble. I'm not assuming superiority over other people or other people's thought processes, opinions on this thing. We even talked about how we hold values differently. We might have the same value at a base level, but we hold it differently. In other words, there's only so many things that we can feel passionate about or act passionately on, based on human capacity. So we have the Syrian refugee crisis. We have a global pandemic. We have the problem of homelessness. We have disparities in education. We have sex trafficking issues. We have all of those things. All of those issues are important to the heart of God.
Right.
But not all of us can be passionately engaging all of those issues. Right. And I think that's sometimes where we begin to label or demonize another person.
We moralize there too.
You should feel as strongly about this as I do. Right. And it's not even humanly possible.
Everybody who loves God will actively fight this.
Exactly.
Right.
We'll be protesting this with me.
It will look the way that I think it ought to be handled. They'll have the same level of passion.
And have you ever had this moment where you're like, you see something that's a problem that matters to the heart of God, but you're like, I can't do anything about that.
No. Absolutely.
And I'm like, the reality is only God can be concerned about all of those concerning things and do something about it. And he does it through different people.
And that's the beauty. Where I can rest is, if that matters to God, and where I'm certain it does, he is rallying people. He is infusing passion in different people. And this is where we can trust God in the he's always using the larger group. And this is where, once we start demonizing a group, we start putting people in this category, they're totally wrong. God's not on their side. I have nothing to learn from them. This is what impoverishes us. God has always wanted us to grow in community. He's never, for instance, just wanted us to learn his way on our own. I'm just going to get the Bible. The problem with you just getting the Bible on your own is you have all these preconceived ideas, and you think that God's plan is to change that. His Spirit's just going to speak, and you've missed the whole weight of Scripture. God has always wanted to speak his word, and his Spirit's want to speak through other people you don't want to listen to, people you don't want to be right, and God's speaking to them. And just like Jesus can be in the face of a homeless person, a forgotten, but he can also be in the face of that person who disagrees with you. He can be the voice of someone in another party, in another denomination.
And we've talked about this before, but isn't it interesting? Even the Bible, as presented, it's other human beings, speaking to us.
Good
possible
point.
Exception being Hebrews.
Yeah.
No one knows if there was a human that wrote that, but or at least they didn't identify themselves. But
I think it was a human.
That was just for fun, Roger. Okay, don't take it too seriously.
Whoa, I can't associate with you anymore.
That's right.
If you don't know for certain the author of Hebrews, I'm
I'm fairly certain.
I'm in the Paul camp.
It was Lazarus.
Oh.
Or Apollos.
Could not possibly be Apollos.
Possibly Priscilla.
Oh. You didn't just say Priscilla.
I did. That was the wife of Aquila, which is kind of the family with two female names in my mind. Aquila and Priscilla. That just sounds feminine. Okay. So what we've learned today is that we need to keep learning that most labels are unhelpful. Right. Not all labels, but most labels, in my experience, are just unhelpful.
We need to stop putting people in camps where we can then dismiss or dump.
And we've learned that following the chicken and the egg question is that the coach or the quarterback. Is it a great coach that makes a great quarterback, or a great quarterback that makes a great coach?
And of course, the answer is always somewhere in the middle.
And question for our listeners: what do you believe that Jesus was writing on the ground when they brought the woman to him?
Leave that in the comment section.
Don't put a fish. I don't want anyone putting fish on there. Okay.
No, you can't tell people what to. No. But
I went into my mode of that guy that's helping you not become your parents. Hey, how about we stop talking about leaving the game before we actually get there?
You don't know him.
No more parking lot talk. Okay. Well, with that, the Pastords are out.
Yes.
Hopefully this
way
recorded.
Out.
And we'll see you, hear you, listen for you next week.
I don't know what you're saying.
I don't either. I feel like a politician. No idea what I just said.